Finally! And I do not think I've wanted a patch more in my life. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Mike LaBelle. We have the playbook and we have a patch. Thank you. We have a patch. I've been playing. I'm going to give you my opinions on what shifted, but I also want to go over very quickly the pitch notes. If you're not familiar, these are the notes that EA puts out officially when they drop an update. Apparently, this is update number 6. It does not feel like it this year. If you're new here, it's free to subscribe. Please and thank you. Let me know your thoughts of the patch in the comment section. Let's have a full-on debate back and forth. I think we're all agreed just off the rip. It's going to be an improvement. It's going to be better because where we were coming from, struggle city. Reduced midfield congestion. That's what you want to hear. Assuming all these things work. Sideline pressure, same situation. We knew that these were extremely problematic. Decreased manual goalkeeper movement and positioning. I'm not mad at that because for the amount that I beat the defense or my opposition makes a big defensive error and a goalkeeper bails them out, happens far too often. More offensive-minded wingbacks at the 3 at the back and the 5 at the back. That's not really an uptick for me, especially considering that in competitive events, they've banned the 3 at the backs and the 5 at the backs. And this almost confirms or reminds people to use them. Expect to see these formations in action at a much higher frequency. Gameplay, more offensive-minded wingbacks. The irony is, I already thought the wingbacks were somewhat offensive-minded. The issue prior was that no one moved on the offensive end. A lot of the attacking positioning was no good, and it forced you to always play through the wingbacks. This is the general summary. EA does give examples, and I can link this down below if you want to see screenshots or even some animations. But because I've already played through the patch, and I've got to admit, undefeated this far, and the game is feeling a lot different, you could read through this. I'm going to give you my actual take. I made a thread on Twitter, and I'd like to break that down in way more depth now that we have a video format. This is the first impression, of course. We'll see throughout a weekend league, and once people have played 30, 40, 50, 100 games, and so forth and so on, whoever grinds it the most. AI defending, way less overpowered. That is a definite. There's larger room for mistake, and the AI does not support in the same manner. The gameplay now, in some ways, at least on the defensive end, reminisces and reminds me a little bit of that original pre-patch, where there was a lot of room for error defensively, and if you didn't move players, you were able to get punished. You could play narrow again. I experimented with the 4-3-1-2 and the 4-1-2-1-2. In both circumstances, I scored a lot of goals, and what I noticed was the spacing, and that's what I talk about. Offensive and defensive spacing has shifted. I noticed different gaps and spaces that opened up on both sides, which I'm not saying it's better or worse just yet, but it was noticeably different, and I actually felt as if there were bigger spaces or spaces allotted between the defenders to the midfielders, which typically is not what you're looking for. But in this case, it meant if you beat a midfield, you had a lot of space to work with. And we'll see if people figure out how to abuse tactics, because that's the reality. There might be, and it would not surprise me, EA overlooks something from a tactical standpoint that allows you to compensate or take advantage or receive a new competitive edge if you shift tactics or play certain formations. It just hasn't been discovered. I haven't seen any videos, a live stream. We haven't had a weekend league as I'm recording this. The patch just happened. But I did not go up against anyone that I felt had figured it out, so to speak. Long shots still as good as ever. Long range, especially if you're timing them green. Finesse shots, Trivella. If you have players that have playstyles or playstyles plus, that will be a noticeable improvement. Just the trajectory and the conversion rates. R1 dribbling, in my opinion, is still mandatory. I felt like defense became a little more logical. You have some more of those lunges, so you could stop an R1 dribble, but it's still going to be just as good, but I don't think it's as quick, if that makes sense. So due to the game and how it shifted, I don't think the R1 dribbling had any fall off, therefore making it a mandatory allotment, resource, maneuver, skill, whatever you want to classify. However, it's not as fast. It's a strange way to describe what I'm describing, but it is the correct way to give an example in my head with the R1 dribbling. So just as good, but it looks a little bit different, and part of that is because the defending is less invasive. Remember, the AI defending does not support the same way. I can turn you a little bit quicker if you're not going to move your player. Goalkeepers, as advertised, are slower with the goalkeeper movement. Again, I'm not really upset with that. I'm someone who uses goalkeeper movement, but I wouldn't say that it is the say-all be-all, and it had become too important. How many times have you gone up against someone who is not good on defense, and because the AI was helping them defensively, they're just moving around with the goalkeeper and letting the AI do the blocking, so they almost have two defensive lines or defensive wall. It reminds me of if you've ever played foosball, where of course you can move the goalkeeper and then you have your line of the defense and you're shifting them around like this. That's exactly where it was at before, and I personally don't love that. It doesn't remind me of a simulation. Some might argue there was a skill gap in being good with the goalkeeper movement. I hear you. I understand. I just don't think it should be that overpowered. Recovery speed was slower, which is good, and I'm talking about you lose the ball, whatever it may be. Those attacking players, they're coming back, but not as quick. The midfielders, they're coming back, but again, the chase back is not as detailed, not as responsive, not as fast-paced. It leaves you more of a window for the counter or to create something, to make a few passes, to string it together before they're back in your face. And I also noticed, even if they're in your area, they don't have as many automated tackles or interceptions. It was getting ridiculous. It's why we were complaining, is that you couldn't play through the middle of the pitch at all. It was never an advantage, and there were so many bodies. Everything I'm putting out is, how do you beat the AI? How do you throw off the fact that you have 7, 8, 9 defensive players? You can't get through the box. I'm not saying it's never going to happen or it's impossible, but there's a little more spacing, or a time gap, if you will. I do expect to see more 5 at the back, probably more 3 at the back. I've already gone up against a couple guys that were using that. I understand when EA makes an announcement about strengthening something, it kind of reminds people, hold on a moment, let me try that out. But again, if you're looking to be a pro player, a competitive player, it really doesn't benefit you, because the 3 at the backs and the 5 at the backs are banned in all tournaments. As I stated with an early disclaimer, it's too early to tell you what tactics have completely shifted the meta. The same with formations, but this does bring more formations into the limelight, because previously you could only play through the wings, therefore narrow formations were out. They're definitely back in. I'm expecting skill moves to have an up, because you have more time to do them, and because defenders aren't aggressively tackling you without your opponent actually going for making those tackles, micromanaging, moving the players. I've said this on record, I'll say it again, I'll preach it to the choir. The skill gaps are often made with defensive management, and if you make that all assisted or AI comprehension, AI fluid, it takes away that gap. And that's why so many people have been upset the last couple months, myself included. I love the game. I'm a passionate fan of the game, of the franchise, of the sport, and it's been really hard the last couple months to put in the time or the grind into the gameplay, because it was all the same, where you're running down the wings, you're looking for a cutback. And then on the defensive side, half the scenarios, I felt as if you not controlling your player would have been better, depending on the breakdown or the circumstance. Clearly, I made a full thread on Twitter. You can read through this there if you want as well. As previously touched on, defensive tackling, more similar to what we saw at the beginning of the year, which I thought was good. Some people were a little frustrated. There's more room for you to have a mistake or a mishap. At the same time, if you go for it and you connect, you have a better chance of winning the ball, breaking up a play. I also put in there, expect some bounce backs. Just because something shifted doesn't mean they're going to be eliminated. Are we still going to see clips, frustration on the internet? Yes. There is no FIFA or FC installment that will not include anger or infuriating moments. It is going to be part of our storytelling and our narrative. That's just the reality. Finishing, I thought, was more reliable due to the goalkeepers not moving as much. And at the same time, if the AI defending's not as combative, they're not disrupting, they're not blocking as much, you're getting more shot opportunities, more chances being created equals more goals. Maybe because it's brand new, but I was scoring like never before. Just an absolute threshold. I think it's a mix of people not being used to having to move players, adjusting to the game, and the fact that defending just got harder, plain and simple. So now I have more offensive tools, because I'm telling you, the ball flows a little bit different. The movement's better. The offensive support is better. The skill moves are working. We now can play through the middle of the pitch. I have more offensive options, and then defending at the same time is giving you less assistance. Almost a perfect storm here to create more goals, higher scoring affairs. That's how I feel in a first playthrough. After 10 games, as I'm recording this video, I've played Division Rivals and Foot Champs, 10 matches. These are my thoughts. These are my takeaways from those 10 games, and I won all 10 of those matches. Full transparency. I thought the passing in general was a little bit better, but it was not very good before. I was having so many errors. Take that with a grain of salt. R1 passes, the driven pass, I thought it was a little bit slower. I noticed with the whip crosses, still very accurate. Corner kicks, I thought were similar to what I've been seeing. There's a lot of different ways to score. You can still score them. I was converting on the near post, going with the short option and some of the R1 dribbling. You do the short corner where you have that interchange between your two attackers and you whip in a back post cross. I was still able to score that. Automated interceptions, defensive steps definitely were reduced. So this makes it where your intro passes, when you're trying to hit your strikers, you're trying to play through that number 9, because you need a wall pass. It's more possible because the defensive players and the midfielders don't step in front of it as naturally. We're just talking about defensive mechanisms, spacing, infrastructure. If you recall previously, I would say it was less a defensive problem, but offensively your players didn't move, and they would often stand behind the midfielders, stand behind or misposition themselves, and you're sitting there questioning, what do I have to do? How do I talk to you, my other offensive players, my team, my squad, and say, you got to move. I need some active footwork. So by all means, not perfect, but definitely improved. I'm looking forward to this patch. I'm looking forward to this weekend. I'm looking forward to grinding the game and maybe even coming back with a part 2 as we have additional updates, because if you're not playing Pro v Pro matches or Foot Champs, the absolute sweatiest of the game modes, even though I did play the qualifier since that was available, but you get where I'm going with this. You won't always see what people have figured out. It's almost as if they saved that for you. They want to send you some messages on the PlayStation. They want to be in the DMs, and they want to showcase what they've learned and also make you want to break a controller. That's how this typically goes. Those are my takeaways. Again, use the comments. Let me know your thoughts, because all of you are playing the game, and I think we could universally agree this has to be an improvement. I would be shocked if you told me, any of you told me, that you liked the game better before this patch. We needed some adjustments. We needed some shifts. We needed some changes. Heading into the holidays, this is good for my sanity. I thought that we had reached a point where toxicity was on the rise, out of control. Last weekend, I tried to do a speed run on a Sunday night, and in my first 6 or 7 games, half of them, my opponents quit out when the game was tied. So they didn't even allow me to get the victory out of the game, and in some of those circumstances, it wasn't at the beginning. It was in the 50th, the 60th, the 70th minute, so it was just a waste of our time and caused you some frustration, which has been a reoccurring theme in FC24. As always, if you're not subscribed, run it up, and I have a lot more content coming out ASAP.